Countries that have adopted accountable and democratic governance systems have made strides on the social and economic front. These countries are reaping the democracy dividend that ensures sound management of public resources and political stability through regular, credible elections and peaceful and predictable transfers of power. These gains created a prolonged period of stability that allowed a new wave of investment. So far, so good throughout the picture. However, as I said at the start, these gains are threatened by the absence of sustained momentum for deepening democracy in Africa. I want to agree with the former UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan, who said, and I quote, "Democracy is not just about one day every 4 or 5 years when elections are held, but a system of government that respects the separation of powers, fundamental freedoms like the freedom of thought, religion, expression, association, and assembly, and the rule of law." Any regime that rides roughshod on these principles loses its democratic legitimacy, regardless of whether it initially won an election, unquote. The Washington Post, in a recent editorial, said, again I quote, "The tyrants of today are more sophisticated than those of the past. Rather than outright totalitarianism, they erect a facade of democracy and subvert it from within. They hold elections that are not competitive, use government-approved shell groups to edge out genuine civil society, pass laws outlawing free association and speech, and force the news media into submission by pulling the strings of the owners and editors. They brand as foreign agents any group receiving money from abroad. These trends are ongoing in Africa. And what has become the vogue is that elections are held as a ritual, which must be won by the incumbent at all costs. And the election observers will come weeks before the elections, stay mostly in the capital cities. At the end of it, then give a verdict that though there may have been flaws here and there, by and large, it was the reflections of the will of the people. Regular multi-party elections have not translated into good governance and respect for the rule of law and fundamental freedoms. That's why there's new thinking that rather than focus on elections alone, there's need to focus on building freer societies, separation of powers, independence of the media and the judiciary, devolution of power and resources, restriction on presidential power, and respect for term limits. While the West has previously underwritten democracy, it appears to be pulling back. In the current issue of Foreign Affairs magazine, respected scholar Larry Diamond says, and I quote again, "One of the biggest challenges facing democracy today is that its biggest champion, the United States, has lost interest in promoting it," unquote. I agree, and it is a sad development. When you see events taking place, like recently, we had elections in the Eastern African countries, which even some observers do not know how to describe. and you see what is happening in Burundi. And you see that the African heads of state meet, and their concern is not about what is happening in Burundi, but more how to pull out of ICC, because one or two heads of state of Africa are charged in ICC. Then you actually begin to understand the magnitude of the challenge that Africa is facing today. Africa's elections are being judged not by how free and fair they are, but how peaceful. The performance of incumbents is getting judged by how they can be used to fight terrorism, no matter the human rights abuses that accompany the fight and the economic gains that come with doing business with those regimes.